Mom deserves the best, and there's no better place to shop for Mother's Day than Whole Foods Market. They're your destination for unbeatable savings, from premium gifts to show-stopping flowers and irresistible desserts. Start by saving 33% with Prime on all body care and candles. Then get a 15-stem bunch of tulips for just $9.99 each with Prime. Round out Mom's menu with festive rosé, irresistible berry chantilly cake, and more special treats. Come celebrate Mother's Day at Whole Foods Market.
Well, as the old story goes, that brave fighter Harry Reid defeated the evil Yucca Mountain Project and saved the people of Nevada from dangerous nuclear waste, right? Except maybe not quite. Rumblings in Washington have Nevada's politicians on high alert because it seems like Yucca Mountain might not be quite dead yet. Ugh, we keep hearing this. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, I sit down with Nevada independent reporter Gabby Berenbaum, who recently wrote about the moves in D.C. that are definitely throwing yuck vibes to Las Vegas about Yucca Mountain. It's Wednesday, May 1st. I'm David Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Gabby, what rumblings are we hearing now in Washington that suggest a renewed interest again in storing nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain?
Yeah, so the rumbling that you're hearing all the way out in Nevada was a subcommittee hearing of the Energy and Commerce Committee. So it's not, it's not on the Richter scale, right, in terms of a congressional committee hearing rumblings. But basically, a few weeks ago, a subcommittee in the House held a hearing about the problem of long-term storage of nuclear waste.
Right.
And the Yucca issue resurfaced again. There were a few members who suggested that, we should take another look at Yucca, that Yucca was killed purely by politics and nothing to do with science. And it definitely caught the Nevada delegation, I think, a little off guard at the tenor of, that they were a little hostile. But I think it was more of just them complaining than any real legislative prospects at this time. So I wouldn't worry too much, but it was definitely noteworthy.
Well, it's like saying Voldemort, everyone turns,
yeah,
right?
Yep. The mountain that must not be named.
Yeah, exactly. The mountain that must not be named. For people who are maybe new to our area or haven't heard about this controversy, maybe you could just set the stage a little bit. Where is Yucca Mountain located, and is it operational on any level?
So Yucca Mountain is 90 miles northwest of Clark County, northwest of Las Vegas, up in Nye County. So it's pretty close to Nevada's population center in Las Vegas. It's really close to some of the military installations, to Creech and Nellis Air Force Base. And basically, it's this mountain that for some 40 years, politicians have wanted to store the nation's long-term nuclear waste in, but never been able to because it's been caught up in various licensing disputes, political disputes. But it's been sort of the monkey on Nevada's back for quite a while that various generations of politicians have tried to make sure it never actually happens.
Now, I know they've put billions of dollars into infrastructure in this sort of mountain site. Is it operational at all, or is it just like $2 billion or whatever, I'm just making that number up, worth of equipment just lying dormant?
Yeah, basically it's been money down the drain so far. It's not operational. All they have right now in the facility is a tunnel. But there's a lot of, if it ever were to be operational, there's a ton of infrastructure steps that would need to be taken. First of all, just the licensing for the project. As of right now, the Department of Energy still doesn't have the requisite license. And so if they ever wanted to, in earnest, try to take another run at Yucca, they'd have to license it, which itself would take another $1 billion+.
A lot of us Nevadans do remember the late Senator Harry Reid. His fight against Yucca Mountain was one of the bigger parts of his legacy. And the conventional wisdom was that Harry Reid had killed Yucca Mountain.
I mean, I think he did in name only. It would take a lot of money and a lot of dedicated effort by both Congress and a presidential administration to even just to restart the Yucca process, let alone get it to a point where it's operational. Even since Harry Reid left the Senate and since he passed, they've taken a few runs at funding the licensing, and it's never actually passed in Congress in the years since. They tried during the Trump administration, it passed the House, but it never passed in the Senate because as long as Nevada, to me, is a swing state, and maybe this is Harry Reid's legacy above all, as long as it's important to presidential candidates, they have no real incentive to bother Nevadans and to upset them. And so what you saw, Trump initially was in favor of restarting licensing on Yucca. If people remember in 2020, he sent out a tweet that was like, Nevada, I hear you. no nuclear waste to Yucca, and took that out of his platform for that run. The Biden administration, has said they're not pursuing it. During the Obama administration, when Harry Reid was around, basically they sort of made an arrangement that Obama had a blue ribbon commission formed that, found that Yucca was not the ideal or suitable site for this long-term nuclear waste.
Based on science,
based
right?
on
I mean, there
science,
was definitely some science brought in there, talking about water tables, talking about fault lines, talking about earthquakes, all that stuff
Definitely,
too.
yeah, based on science. But I think the genius of Harry Reid in this case was to ensure that if science ever goes out of fashion, as we've seen sometimes it does, there's real infrastructural challenges. So for the biggest one, I think, is transportation. So, he around the margins tweaked various Native American reservation boundary lines, Basin and Range National Monument, which he advocated for. All of these various protected lands make it really difficult to conceive of there ever being a rail line to Yucca Mountain that could even transport the waste, particularly given the various mountain passes that would be involved. Any preferred route basically doesn't exist anymore because of the ways that various tribal lands or basin and range boundaries are. So I think Harry Reid both thought about the science, the politics, and just the literal infrastructure on the ground, and if this is practical at all, and made it so that it would be really tough to be.
So I guess it sounds like he didn't kill it. He just threw down this crazy ass labyrinth with Yucca in the middle. But I still see these, reports coming out like yours recently in Nevada Independent, and it's like zombies. It just keeps coming back from the dead. It's Jason from Friday the 13th. It just won't stay in the ground. So what would it take, Gabby, to drive a final stake into this monster's heart?
Yeah, so I think what the delegation wants and what the state wants is basically to end the license, whether that's via the courts and the potential of a license, whether that's via the courts, via an act of Congress. They basically, to take one, a final kill shot at Jason, at Michael Myers, this villain of Yucca Mountain, would be to terminate the possibility that the Department of Energy could license the site. Another way that the congressional delegation is looking at that is to pass a law that implements consent-based siting. This is a new sort of term and process that Democrats have favored. That would mean that any potential long-term storage site would need to have the consent of the community. And that's not just, Nye County has always been in favor of this, but that would be the governor of the state, right? Yeah. That would be the governor of the state. That would be various other stakeholders. The problem with consent-based siting is that it's kind of hard to find any community that wants nuclear waste, that everyone can agree on that. So I think some Democrats feel like, sure, let's go with consent-based siting. And once we go back to everyone and everyone says no, then maybe we reopen the Yucca debate. But for now, that's what the delegation is working on.
See, they just have to rebrand it. Instead of calling it nuclear waste, just calling it glowing rock candy or something like that. It's weird, though, because I have heard some states like New Mexico and their salt flats, they've kind of suggested that they might be a good spot. But it just, the original bill, Gabby, was called the Screw Nevada bill because it really narrowed down possible sites to just Yucca Mountain. Are we safe for now, then? I mean, you said it's maybe just rumblings. Could it become a little more full-throated?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I don't think there's anything serious behind it. Like I said, there was no sort of legislation attached to this. President Biden has committed to this is not a priority for him. I think the one thing potentially just to keep an eye on is that Project 2025, which is not officially part of the Trump campaign, but it's a lot of former Trump officials, people who are within Trump's orbit. It's a set of sort of policy plans for basically each agency, each arm of the federal government to sort of come out of the gate stronger and more efficient than they did the last time, a lot of which would be dismantling elements of bureaucracy and federal agencies. On the topic of nuclear waste, they have said that they're interested in reopening the licensing process for Yucca. So Trump himself in 2020 said that, he wasn't interested in that. It appears that some of the people around him might be. Some of the members of the delegation have told me they're worried about a second term for him. Obviously, he wouldn't feel necessarily accountable to Nevada voters the way he is when he's asking for their vote like he is now. So that could raise alarms for them. But again, that's all somewhat hypothetical. And just restarting the licensing, like I said, would take billions of dollars, authorization from Congress, which to this point they've never been able to achieve.
Now, whenever Yucca does come up in any sort of federal conversation, the troops typically rally, meaning the congressional delegation, local legislators, et cetera. Sometimes they use it for, purposes in the election to bolster their cred. Have we heard from Governor Lombardo on this recent announcement?
Yeah, Governor Lombardo, I don't believe, has said anything publicly about it. I mean, it's the same, the director of the sort of state level agency that handles Yucca stuff is the same guy who was there from the Sisolak administration. So I think they've been pretty consistent in looking at all the various avenues in which they can stop things, particularly in the court of public opinion. They did suggest at this meeting that I virtually attended, that director, Fred Dilger, did suggest that he felt like the governor maybe put a pause on some of the efforts that he wanted, a sort of social media campaign rollout. But Lombardo's team told me they're fully committed to stopping anything to do with Yucca. They're definitely on board with that.
Okay, because I would imagine that not saying anything would be as big a signal as saying that you support it, right? At this point?
In theory, I mean, I think because this wasn't like a significant threat, I don't know that he's necessarily obligated to speak. It seems like, from what I can tell, his administration doesn't want Yucca Mountain to move forward. It's a bit interesting in Congress. So Congressman Mark Amodei, right, the only Republican from Nevada, he has supported restarting licensing, but not actually sort of exploring licensing, but not actually moving forward with the project. So he kind of has it a little bit both ways there compared to the Democrats in the delegation who have followed in the Harry Reid model of saying absolutely not under zero circumstances. But he did vote against the last attempt to fund that process when it last came up during the Trump administration. So I think,
it really has developed into a litmus test. So, but there are like pockets of, you mentioned Nye County. I think there's some people in Lincoln County too. They see Yucca as potential jobs, that they don't think that the science is as bad off as it sounds like it is in a lot of these blue ribbon reports, but whatever. Are there any influential people, pockets of support in Nevada that could change Nevada's pretty consistent position?
Not that I know of or that I've heard of. I mean, it really feels like for the last several decades, most of the elected officials and the apparatus of the state have been pretty invested at the state level in turning away from Yucca. And I think an interesting potential new ally for opponents, which would be, the delegation and the governor and the various state agencies, is that the military, they feel pretty strongly that the Air Force, which, is running, and the Navy, which is running rocket operations, flight operations, really close, about 50 miles from that Yucca Mountain site. If it ever got to a point where the licensing was moving forward, a lot of the opponents feel that the Air Force would be a pretty strong ally in standing against Yucca, just based on a lot of the activity that they have going on that would have potential for some sort of really devastating accident if there were ever some sort of collision or something.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and we have a lot of military bases, obviously Creech and Nellis, foremost among them. Well, aside from whatever it is that Amadei's position may specifically be, what are the next steps of the Nevada delegation to push back on this kind of subcommittee's exploratory comments, I would call it?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the subcommittee, Congresswoman Titus, who's the dean of the delegation, right, the longest serving one, she already had a letter ready to go explaining all the reasons why licensing Yucca is a bad and costly idea. I think moving forward, I've heard that they're trying to, all come together to put out some sort of, whether it's a letter or some other sort of public statement to show that they're unified in their approach to this particular issue. But I think for now, what I've heard from the delegation is they're just sort of keeping an eye on it, monitoring the situation. It is also helpful that the chairwoman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, the main committee where this hearing was housed, Kathy McMorris Rogers, is retiring at the end of this term. So she'll be gone. And so I think they're just monitoring to see if there's, anyone who's going to pick up the mantle of funding Yucca licensing and looking to step in from there.
One thing that's always escaped me, Gabby, is that they did put all this infrastructure into the literal Yucca Mountain. They built this tunnel. There's a lot of steel and concrete, I'd imagine, maybe even equipment out there. I know people have taken tours. They've mentioned all that. Why not just dismantle all that? Why not just empty it out, do a nice little garage sale, and close that mountain forever? Just fill it up with dirt again.
It's a great question. I think that would also take an act of Congress, just as it would take an act of Congress to fund it. I believe it takes an act of Congress to officially shut that down and defund it. And because it's a federal site, I think as much as people in the state would love to go in there and close up shop, it would have to come from the federal level. And I think we've seen when this has come up for votes in the House, there is kind of a majority that supports moving forward in some level on Yucca, but because of the various obstacles and traps that Harry Reid laid, and the importance of Nevada in elections, the delegation has been able to sort of either keep those votes from happening at various points, or political leaders have stopped those votes from happening in order to benefit Nevada politicians, or fought back at those attempts.
Gabby, last question. Do you see any of this playing out in the upcoming election cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, Biden's made his position clear on it. He doesn't support any further activity. I could definitely see the Democrats trying to press Trump on it. We'll see if he makes another statement, if he, denounces what some of his advisors and people in his circle are calling for in Project 2025. It certainly, it worked in 2020. He felt enough pressure in order to say, I'm not pursuing this anymore. And so I could definitely see whether it's us in the media or it's Democrats trying to nail him down on that issue.
Yeah, I wonder about the down ticket races too, including, the primary in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. Senate race itself or some of the congressional races. Any sort of whispers that this might be one of those issues that kind of zombie-like came back from the dead and are going to inject themselves into other debates within our election cycle here in the state?
Well, yeah, you might have a crystal ball there, David, because this actually just came up in the U.S. Senate race. So the LA Times on April 30th, that's a Tuesday, published a bit of an expose of comments that Sam Brown made in 2022 to a local Republican club, talking about how Yucca was a missed opportunity for revenue for the state. And so this is definitely going out on a limb for him from even where other Republican candidates are. I mean, Adam Laxalt didn't say something like this. Governor Lombardo certainly would never say something like this. But he said that he feels like it's a missed opportunity for Nevada if they don't collect on the revenue that Yucca could provide, and that he feels like misunderstanding and Harry Reid politics sort of got in the way of an opportunity he wanted to support. And so Democrats, as you would expect, were ready to dust off those press releases that I'm sure they've had around since the 80s. And the Rosen campaign has already been hitting Brown on that, even though it's been like one day.
Yeah, they have some templates ready to go.
Oh, I'm sure the draft press releases are the same as they've always been.
In case of mention of Yucca, break glass, and then it's boom, that press release is right out. Well, Gabby Berenbaum, thank you for your reporting on this, and thanks for coming back and sharing it here on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, hey, go tell a friend. That's what friends do. They share the good news about good things like us. You can also rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky. Because what's more fun than talking about nuclear waste?
Nothing.
Huh? Nothing.